Tonight, we're going to a bridge that breathes. Mangetsu Bridge looks harmless in the daylight. Tourists, lanterns, pictures. But after sundown, the stone pulses. Locals say a woman was buried alive inside its foundation, so the river would never take it back. And when the fog thickens, the bridge remembers her. Stay to the end, because what we found there doesn't just prove a haunting, it exposes a ritual Japan tried to forget. Haruto Kato was 23, a quiet university student from Tokyo who preferred the company of books over people. While his classmates were chasing internships, planning careers in finance, or falling in love, Haruto spent his nights in the university library surrounded by dust and silence. He was writing his thesis on forgotten Japanese superstitions and rituals used to appease the dead. It wasn't a popular topic. Even his friends teased him for being obsessed with ghosts and curses. But to Haruto, these old beliefs were fragments of human memory, proof that fear could shape entire generations. When his professor mentioned a small town in Gifu Prefecture, where a centuries-old bridge called Heida no Hashi was rumored to have been built over a human sacrifice, Haruto felt a chill of curiosity. The legend said the bridge had survived every flood and earthquake because a young woman's soul had been buried alive within its foundation. Historians dismissed it as myth, but Haruto knew that behind every legend was a truth people once believed enough to die for. He decided to go. It was supposed to be a simple field study, a short trip to collect interviews, photos, and folklore. He told himself it was just research, but in truth, something deeper pulled him. His late grandmother had once told him bedtime stories about bridges that remembered those who were lost beneath them. He hadn't thought of her words in years, not until now. Maybe this was his way of reconnecting with that memory. The train from Tokyo to Gifu took most of the day. The city blurred into countryside, and by afternoon, the mountains grew tall and blue against the horizon. When Haruto stepped off at the small local station, the air felt different, thicker, quieter, filled with the smell of pine and rain. He took a bus to head a village where only a few hundred people lived. The road wound through forests and rice paddies before finally reaching a cluster of traditional houses by the river. He rented a room above an old tea house run by a woman named Mrs. Saito. She was kind, but strangely watchful. When he mentioned his purpose, studying local legends, she froze for a moment, then set the teapot down carefully. "Folklore," she repeated. "Then you must remember not to go near the bridge after sunset. The river keeps what it's been given." Her tone was calm, almost motherly, but her eyes said something else, fear or maybe warning. Haruto smiled politely, thinking it was just local superstition. "Of course," he said. "I'll be careful." But that night, as he lay on his futon, he could hear the faint sound of flowing water through the paper walls, rhythmic and endless, like someone breathing beneath the floor. The next morning, Haruto began his work. He carried a notebook, a small camera, and an audio recorder. His plan was to document local stories about the Heida Bridge, interview older residents, and study how such myths survived in the modern age. Most villagers were friendly, but reluctant to talk about the bridge. An old man sweeping the post office steps told him, "Some things are better left under the river." A woman selling vegetables whispered that no one crossed the bridge after dark. Even the Shinto priest at the local shrine refused an interview, bowing politely and saying, "The bridge has already received its offering. There's nothing more to say." Despite the silence, Haruto continued observing. The bridge itself was beautiful, a curved structure of moss-covered stone, guarded by weathered red railings. In the daylight, it looked harmless, almost picturesque. Tourists came during weekends to take photos and leave before sunset. Haruto noticed that even during busy hours, no one lingered long near the center. Every evening he'd return alone, watching how the sun bled into the water and how shadows from the lantern poles stretched like fingers across the path. A small sign stood near the entrance. "Cross only before sundown. Offer silence to what endures." He assumed it was poetic, but something about the wording unsettled him. Why silence? Why what endures? At the tea house, Mrs. Saito's grandson, a boy of 8 or 9, sometimes joined him for lunch. The child was cheerful, but when Haruto asked if he'd ever been on the bridge, the boy shook his head quickly. "Mama says the lady in the river gets lonely when someone stops," he said innocently. Haruto tried to laugh, but it didn't come out right. He just wrote the line down in his notes. Days passed peacefully. Haruto documented local sayings, sketched the surrounding landscape, and photographed carvings near the bridge that seemed older than the rest. At night, he uploaded his findings to his blog. His posts were calm, factual, even charming. One caption read, "They say some bridges connect the living and the dead, but I think it's just legend." He received a few comments from classmates joking about his ghost trip. He laughed along, assuring them it was nothing like that, just history. Yet, each time he glanced out the window toward the river, he noticed the mist gathering thicker than before. Everything felt normal on the surface. The villagers went about their routines. Children played after school. Lanterns swayed gently with the evening breeze. But there was something unspoken in the air, a rhythm of unease hiding under everyday life. He couldn't tell if it was his imagination or something in the way people avoided his eyes when he mentioned the bridge. Still, his logic told him fear often lingered longer than truth. He believed that by documenting it, he could separate myth from memory. Haruto's story, at this point, could belong to anyone: a curious student, a quiet town, an ancient rumor. Nothing dangerous, nothing supernatural, just human fascination with the past. But the thing about curiosity is that it doesn't stop where it should. It whispers, just a little closer, just one more step. Haruto would soon take that step, the one that turns research into fate. It's always the ordinary days, the calm mornings, the simple meals, the harmless questions that lead us into stories we were never meant to find. The bridge was quiet that morning, too quiet. Haruto stood in the middle of it, his breath fogging in the cold air, his recorder clicking on. Beneath his shoes, the stones glistened with dew and age, each one laid, legend said, with salt and bone. He bent down to photograph the carvings that ran along the railing, weathered shapes that resembled kanji, though no modern scholar could read them. Then the bridge shivered. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a truck on the highway. The tremor came from beneath, deep and pulsing, like something breathing under layers of rock. Haruto froze. For a moment, the only sound was his heartbeat. Then he exhaled sharply and forced a laugh. "Just seismic activity," he muttered, pulling out his phone. Japan had thousands of minor quakes every year. He opened an earthquake app, no alerts. Still, he tried to rationalize. Maybe it was the river, the current pressing against the foundation. Maybe the echo of his own steps made it feel alive. He scribbled a note in his journal. Bridge vibration observed. Possible water resonance. Satisfied, he adjusted his camera and kept filming. The lens flickered twice, as if reacting to something unseen. When he reviewed the footage, he noticed something odd. In one frame, a faint shadow passed behind him, not the blur of a bird or a cloud, but a silhouette that seemed to look back. The shape of a woman's face, pale and expressionless, lingered for a fraction of a second. He blinked, rewound, paused. Nothing. Just the bridge, the mist, and the sound of running water. He closed the device. "Pareidolia," he whispered. "The mind sees patterns where none exist. That's what every good researcher would say." But when he touched the stone railing again, he felt it. A faint heartbeat, steady and human. He jerked his hand away, pulse racing. Gathering his things, Haruto pretended not to notice how his hands trembled. He walked toward the end of the bridge, whispering the old legend under his breath. A woman was buried alive beneath the final arch to keep the bridge standing. It was folklore, poetic and tragic, but never proven. Halfway across, a sound stopped him. Flip. He turned. His notebook lay open on the ground. He hadn't dropped it. The pages turned by themselves until they stopped near the back. Then, before his eyes, black ink bled through the page. Not printed, not written by a pen. It was appearing. Slowly, trembling letters formed one line. "Do not forget me." He stared, frozen. The ink glistened wet, fresh, undeniable. He reached for the page and the smell hit him. Iron. Blood. His instincts screamed to run, but his rational mind refused. He tore the page out, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his jacket. Maybe the ink reacted to moisture or someone tampered with his journal earlier. Logical explanations existed. They had to. As he walked off the bridge, though, he felt something follow. Not footsteps, but a presence. Each time he blinked, he saw a figure standing on the opposite end, shrouded in mist, watching. When he finally turned for good, there was nothing. Only the river whispering below, carrying what sounded like a woman's voice. You remembered. That night, Haruto replayed his footage at the guest house near the village. Everything looked normal, except one clip. At 12:14 p.m., as when he first touched the stone, a faint pulse distorted the sound recording, a rhythmic thump-thump like a heartbeat. He amplified the audio. Beneath the pulse, another sound emerged, a breath, a whisper, and if slowed down, almost words. Old Japanese, maybe. He turned off the camera, heart pounding, the echo still in his ears. He didn't sleep that night. Sometimes the first sign isn't a scream in the dark, it's a whisper asking to be heard. If you touched the stone and it pulsed back, would you keep filming or would you run? Comment what you do and subscribe, because what happens next on Hit a Bridge will make Haruto question what's truly buried beneath. Villagers refuse to speak. An old woman says, she won't let the bridge fall. Haruto expected silence to thaw once he explained he was a university researcher, not a reporter. It didn't. The more he asked, the more the village arranged itself into polite obstacles. Shutters drawn, courtyards swept when he approached, conversations trimmed to weather and prices. The strange things did not stop. They repeated, as if rehearsing. At daybreak on the bridge, the stone throbbed beneath his palm. One slow pulse, a pause, then another, like a distant heart. His notebook, zipped inside his pack, had flipped itself open again. On the new page, the damp words waited. "Do not forget me." He photographed them anyway, he told the grocer. "Ink can run if the air's wet," the man said, aligning oranges. "Humidity writes its own stories." When Haruto mentioned the pulse, the grocer shrugged. "Bridges complain. They carry us." The conversation slid away. Intensity accumulated in small increments. The river quieted when he stepped onto the span. He recorded it, then played the audio back and heard only breeze, and once a thread of a woman's exhale. He consulted the barber, a man who kept a shrine of antique scissors. "Earth remembers," the barber said, tapping his counter. "It complains, then it stops." Haruto asked about the notebook. The barber looked at the doorway, then at his hands. "Memories sweat through paper," he murmured and changed the subject. The old woman sat beneath the cedar torii, knitting wool into a loop that never closed. She didn't look at him when he bowed. "She won't let the bridge fall," she said, as if answering a question he had not asked. "Who is she?" Haruto asked. The needles paused. "The one the stones owe," she whispered, and the clicking began again. At night, Haruto woke at exactly 2:13, the clock digits cool and blue. The smell of wet limestone seeped through the tatami, iron blooming on his tongue. Once he felt the futon dip as if a knee had pressed there, then lift. The shoji didn't move, but he heard the dry hush of paper sliding anyway, as if a door had learned to pretend. By the third day, the repetition turned cruel. Crows lined the railing whenever he stood in the center. When he stepped off, they rose as one and vanished into the cedar canopy without a cry. He dusted chalk along a seam between stones. Hours later, a single long groove cut through the powder, not hoof or boot, more like a braid pulled across and dragged back. He brought the photo to the community hall. Men glanced, shoulders lifted. "Chalk shifts in wind," someone said, and the room moved on. Even the offerings changed while no one watched. The shrine dish held a pear at sunrise, a persimmon by noon, a sliced apple by dusk, browning without flies. He set a thread across the plate to see if someone lifted the fruit. By evening, the thread lay unbroken, yet the apple was there, wet with juice. He told a young mother. She smiled and guided her child in a quiet arc away from the bridge's center. On the fourth morning, a municipal engineer arrived in an orange vest. Haruto exhaled with relief. They tapped joints, leveled beams, measured vibration. "No structural risk," the engineer said. "No unusual frequency." Haruto asked them to place a hand on the stone. "I feel nothing," one answered, already writing normal on a form. He tried logic, then superstition, then logic again. He mapped temperatures, checked pre-war records, and studied tales about foundation sacrifices and river rites. Each explanation worked until he set a palm to the rail. The pulse returned, patient and proud, proof that did not care for proof. At sunset, he found a red thread snagged where the railing met the parapet. It was frayed as if tugged by teeth and warm in his hand, though the air had cooled. That night, he dreamed of a woman's hair braided with red, the braid pressed flat into stone while voices counted toward an ending he could not hear. No one else looked alarmed. Children ran everywhere, except the precise center of the span, where parents steered them out of habit they refused to name. Shopkeepers waved. The priest nodded. The old woman kept knitting. The village wore its caution like a smile, and the smile never slipped. Strange events repeated. The intensity rose. And when Haruto finally asked on the fifth morning, "Can you hear it? The bridge is breathing," a fisherman hesitated, then tightened his grip and said kindly, "You're tired." The hook slipped under the current, as if something below had swallowed both question and answer. No one answered him. The rain had stopped, but the air around Heda Bridge was trembling as if it remembered every scream buried beneath it. Haruto stood in the mist, holding his notebook, his fingers cold and shaking. The pages flipped on their own. Fresh ink bled through the paper like veins, twisting into words that formed before his eyes. They lied. I was not chosen. I was taken. The letters dripped red, as though written in blood. He stepped back, but the air thickened. The bridge groaned, a deep breathing sound that didn't belong to stone. At first he thought it was the wind or the water beneath, but then came the voice. It wasn't loud. It was layered, broken, echoing from every direction at once. "Do you remember my name?" Haruto froze. The voice carried pain and fury tangled together. The notebook fell from his hand, slapping against the wet wood. Beneath him, the bridge pulsed, slow, steady, like a living heart trapped under layers of rock. He looked down into the river. The moonlight shimmered across the surface. For a second, he saw his own reflection. Then it changed. A woman's pale face appeared beneath the water, her eyes closed, hair floating like ink. Her lips moved, mouthing something he couldn't hear. And then, her eyes snapped open. Haruto stumbled back, heart racing. The lanterns hanging from the railings began to flicker violently, one by one, until they burst. Tiny explosions of glass and flame scattering through the fog. The air turned cold, sharp enough to bite. The river below surged upward, black as oil, rising higher than it should. From its center she emerged, not climbing, not swimming, but pulled upward by some invisible force. Her body hung in the mist, twisted, limp, water streaming from her hair and fingertips. Her skin was gray, veins dark like cracked stone. Haruto couldn't move. The mist coiled around her like smoke alive. Her mouth opened, but what came out wasn't a scream. It was 1,000 whispers overlapping, words of pain, betrayal, pleading. The sound pressed against his skull like it wanted to crawl inside. The bridge began to tremble harder, and cracks spidered across the surface. The cracks weren't random. They curved into shapes, patterns, and then Haruto realized they looked like ribs. The bridge's foundation was not just stone. It was bone. He understood then. The villagers hadn't lied when they said, She won't let the bridge fall. She was the bridge, her body, her spirit, forced to hold it up for generations. A human sacrifice, trapped forever to keep the structure standing. And now that he had disturbed her rest, the boundary was breaking. Water exploded upward again, lashing at his legs. The river wrapped around him, freezing and alive, pulling him toward the edge. He clawed at the railing, but the wood splintered. "Please," he gasped, but the ghost moved closer, her eyes glowing white through the fog. "They buried me alive to make it last," she whispered, voice echoing inside his head. "And now you've woken me." The water climbed higher, around his waist, his chest. His muscles stiffened, his breath turned shallow. The notebook beside him flipped open again, pages turning violently until one stopped. Across it, a single message burned through the paper. "If I fall, it ends." Haruto stared at the words, mind racing. She wanted him to break the bridge, to free her from the curse. But if the bridge fell, the entire village downstream would be destroyed. Dozens of homes, innocent people. He couldn't do it, but if he didn't, she would drown him here and now. She reached for him. Her hand passed through his shirt like smoke, but pressed against his chest as if gripping his heart directly. Pain flared through him, sharp and electric. His knees gave out. He tried to shout, to reason, but the only sound was the roar of the river and the screaming wind. Then, images flooded his mind. Villagers dragging a young woman, binding her in ropes, her screams echoing through the night, the hammering of wood, the sealing of stone, her last breath turning into silence beneath concrete. Now her rage filled the sky. She had waited centuries for someone to hear her. And Haruto, unlucky and curious, had become her witness and her punishment. He struggled, reaching for the notebook again, but it slipped from his grasp and vanished beneath the waves. His lungs burned. The bridge groaned again, louder, deeper, like the cry of a dying animal. "Please," he whispered. He didn't know if he was begging her to stop or begging himself to stay alive. For the briefest moment, her face changed. The fury faded. She looked almost human, young, sorrowful, her eyes glistening with something that wasn't hate, but grief. "Remember me," she said softly. "That's all I ever wanted." Her fingers loosened. The water let go. Haruto fell to the bridge, coughing violently, dragging himself up on trembling arms. He looked up in time to see her body rising again, weightless, glowing faintly as if dissolving into moonlight. The bridge shuddered one last time before a deep crack split through its center. A column of water erupted upward, carrying her spirit high into the fog, then vanishing in silence. He lay there for a long time, soaked and shaking. The mist began to fade. The moonlight returned, soft and cold. The bridge was still standing, but barely. Beneath the wood, he could still feel something, a faint, fading heartbeat. He turned toward the river. For a second, he thought he saw her again, kneeling beneath the surface, watching him. Then the current shifted, and she was gone. Haruto whispered into the quiet night, his voice weak but steady. "I won't forget you." The words echoed faintly across the valley. Somewhere deep below, the last ripple broke, and for the first time in centuries, the river was still. The first crack echoed like a scream beneath Haruto's feet. He stumbled, clutching his satchel, as pale handprints pressed through the stone railing, desperate and trembling. The bridge groaned, alive, ancient, hungry. Instinct took over. He ran. Behind him, the surface of the bridge rippled as though breathing. The carvings he had studied earlier, faint kanji etched into the stone, began to glow crimson. Each symbol pulsed like a heartbeat, sinking with the panic in his chest. "Stop looking back," he whispered to himself. "Just move." But the air thickened, damp with the smell of river silt and iron. A woman's voice, faint, pleading, carried on the wind. "Do not forget me." The words crawled up his spine. Haruto tripped, scraping his palms against the rough edge of a stone post. Warmth smeared across his skin. Blood. His or the bridge's, he couldn't tell. When he reached the end of the bridge, the mist swallowed everything behind him. The moment his shoes touched the dirt path, the sound stopped. The wind died. The world went eerily still, as if holding its breath. He collapsed to his knees, gasping. His notebook slid out of his bag, landing open on the ground. On its page, fresh ink bled through the paper, forming words he didn't write. "You left me there." His hands trembled. The bridge stood silent in the fog, its surface cracked, its edges glowing faintly like veins under skin. He wanted to believe it was over, that he had escaped. But the truth pressed against his mind like those ghostly hands through the stone. Haruto staggered back toward the village. Every few steps he glanced over his shoulder. The bridge never moved, yet it felt alive, watching. The faint echo of weeping followed him all the way down the road. By the time he reached the inn, dawn was creeping over the mountains. The old woman who managed the place stood in the doorway, her face pale as she saw him. "You went to the bridge," she whispered. Haruto didn't answer. He just nodded, his clothes damp, his breath shallow. Her expression hardened with something between pity and fear. Those who hear her never sleep the same again. He looked at his palms. The blood had dried into faint dark lines, except they weren't random. They had formed into tiny imprints of fingers, as though someone had gripped him tightly before letting go. He scrubbed at them until his skin burned, but the marks didn't fade. That night, Haruto tried to record his findings. The tape recorder whirred softly on the desk as he spoke. "Field note," he began, his voice unsteady. "Bridge of Hedda. Structure seems to react to touch, to presence. Possible residual energy of burial site. Female subject. Unknown identity." The light flickered. The recorder clicked off by itself. Then, a whisper. Not from outside, but from within the room. "Remember me." The notebook slammed shut. Haruto froze, every hair on his neck standing. Slowly, he turned toward the mirror near the door and saw a reflection that wasn't his own. Behind him, a figure leaned over his shoulder, face half-formed from mist, eyes hollow yet pleading. He spun around. Nothing. Only the cold air and the faint sound of dripping water. The bridge wasn't done with him. The next morning, Haruto packed his belongings. He left the village before sunrise, not looking back once. Yet as the bus rolled through the fog and crossed the river miles away, he caught sight of it through the window. The bridge, faint but unmistakable. And in that fleeting second, he saw her. A woman standing in the middle of the span, her hair long and wet, her hands pressed against the stone, staring straight at him. The glass of the bus window fogged up. A message appeared, drawn from condensation by an unseen hand. "You promised." He blinked, and it vanished. Days later, back in Tokyo, Haruto submitted his final report. He deleted the recordings, burned his notes, and locked away every piece of evidence. But some nights, as he lay awake, he could still hear the distant sound of water dripping. And in his dreams, the bridge waits, the cracks glow red, the hands reach out, and the voice, always the same, whispers from the dark, "Do not forget me." Haruto wakes with tears on his cheeks and the faint pressure of fingers on his wrist. He escaped the bridge, but part of him never left. The old man's voice trembled like an autumn leaf. "No maiden volunteered," he said. "They were taken." Haruto froze. The words struck him harder than the mountain wind. For days he had followed fragments, fading ink, whispered tales, the bridge's strange pulse beneath his hands. But now, everything fell into place with sickening clarity. The village legend spoke of a young woman who offered herself to the river gods so the bridge could stand forever. But that was a lie. The old man confessed that it was not a willing sacrifice. It was an execution disguised as devotion. He led Haruto to the edge of the riverbank, where moss-covered stones hid an entrance once sealed by generations. The air was damp, heavy with the weight of silence. "My grandfather told me," the old man said, "the first bridge collapsed 3 times. They believed it was cursed. So the elders decided a life must anchor it." Haruto's stomach tightened. A life? The man nodded. They took a girl from the neighboring village. She was barely 18. The night was storming. They said she would save us all. But she screamed until the earth swallowed her voice. He paused, eyes glistening under the lantern's flicker. They buried her alive under the main pillar. They mixed her blood with the mortar. They said her soul would keep the river calm. And when the next bridge stood, it never fell again. Haruto opened his notebook. The pages fluttered, as if pushed by an unseen hand. The words written days before, "Do not forget me," now glowed faintly, the ink shimmering like veins of light. It was her. The girl beneath the bridge had reached out through time, through ink, through stone. He flipped through every page. Each cryptic phrase, each trembling symbol. They were not random hauntings. They were her memories clawing their way out. Haruto felt the air shift. The river began to churn violently, as if stirred by rage. She was betrayed, he murmured, not honored. The old man sank to his knees. Every family here carries guilt, he whispered. We built our peace on her agony. Every generation knows, and every generation stays silent. Lightning ripped the sky. The bridge's arch glowed faintly crimson, as though remembering the blood beneath it. Haruto stepped closer, the ground vibrating beneath his feet. The pulse he felt on the first day, that heartbeat in the stone, now throbbed faster, stronger. It wasn't the bridge's rhythm. It was hers. She was taken, not chosen, Haruto said under his breath, and now she wants them to remember. The old man trembled, gripping his cane. She doesn't want remembrance, he said. She wants justice. At that moment, Haruto realized the haunting wasn't random. Every creak, every whisper, every handprint pressing from beneath the bridge. They weren't warnings. They were accusations. The legend had inverted the truth. The spirit wasn't a guardian protecting the village from collapse. She was a prisoner beneath their pride, silenced by their fear. And now, as the cracks along the bridge began to glow with a faint bloody light, Haruto understood that she had waited centuries, not for release, but for reckoning. He turned to the old man. Why tell me now? The man's eyes filled with tears. Because it's happening again. The river is rising. The bridge bleeds. The curse is waking. Haruto stepped back, heart pounding. All the signs, the whispering stones, the trembling ground, the ghostly writing, were converging toward this revelation. Every piece of the puzzle had led to the same horrifying truth. The bridge wasn't built to honor a sacrifice. It was built to imprison a soul. A sharp sound echoed, stone cracking. Haruto spun around. A fissure ran across the arch, leaking a thin stream of red that dripped into the river below. The air filled with the metallic scent of blood. He whispered, "She's still here." The old man clutched Haruto's arm. Leave before it's too late. Once her name is spoken, the river will demand balance. Haruto's mind raced. He thought of the notebook, the message, "Do not forget me." He realized she didn't want revenge alone. She wanted her story told, the truth reclaimed. He raised his voice above the storm. Then let them remember. Let the world know what they buried. The wind roared, carrying voices, faint, weeping, hundreds of them. The river surged upward, waves splashing against the stones like desperate hands. The bridge groaned, its surface crawling with shadows. The old man fell to his knees, praying incoherently. Haruto, trembling, opened his notebook once more. The final page turned on its own. New words formed, carved by invisible fingers. Now you know. The lantern extinguished. Darkness swallowed the riverbank. But Haruto could still hear her, the girl beneath the bridge, whispering in gratitude and fury. The revelation was complete, the myth shattered. The haunting was not a warning of danger. It was the echo of injustice demanding to be seen. And as thunder rolled across the valley, Haruto realized that knowing the truth didn't free him. It bound him. Because once you uncover what was buried, you become part of its story. What do you think, viewers? Was the spirit beneath the Heda Bridge truly appeased or merely awakened? In Japanese folklore, structures like bridges and castles were often believed to require a Hitobashira, a human pillar. Villagers would sacrifice a young maiden, burying her alive beneath the foundation to ensure the building's strength and the land's peace. But in truth, those souls were never at rest. Legends say their spirits linger, bound to stone and water, demanding remembrance or revenge. The cracks glowing under Haruto's bridge are more than a haunting. They're the echo of injustice disguised as tradition. Every time someone passes that bridge without knowing the truth, her silence grows louder. What would you do if you discovered your hometown's peace was built on someone's suffering? Would you expose it or stay silent to protect the myth? Comment your thoughts below. Tell us, would you help her or let her remain buried forever? And if you want to uncover the next story hidden in Japan's shadows, don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on the bell. The next chapter awaits.